Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. This is part 2 for this news bulletin today, Wednesday, November 28th, 2012. I'm Darko. My website is ggnonline.com, and on YouTube my channels are ddarko 2012 and 2013. All the headlines and links will be posted in YouTube's video description. That's right down here if you wanted to check it out. Alright, so we just covered these cell phone towers and neuroscience and all kinds of crazy stuff, including this city passing a resolution to warn residents of the health dangers of cell phones and a link to cancer after this dude had a big tumor removed from his brain, saying he kept getting headaches. One day I realized I hold my cell phone with the same hand up against his ear. When I was done, I put it in these pockets. So, yeah. Pretty interesting, but they'll never actually say that. They're all about making cigarettes basically almost illegal, linking them with cancer. But they won't ever make a link with autism to vaccines. They won't ever make a link to cancer and cell phones. They won't ever make a link between genetically modified food and being sterilized or infertile and other forms of digestive problems. It'll be mentioned every here and there, but they'll never really stick, you know what I mean? It'll never go out there and things won't change from it. This first one I have is a video 50 minutes long. A viewer sent it to me. Go check it out. Sentient oil mutating with Mr. Venture's synthetic DNA in the Gulf. This guy proposes that they use a computer to produce a man-made genome, synthetic DNA, and without any testing or even really thinking it through, they release it into the Gulf to eat the oil during the oil disaster of the Gulf of Mexico. It began mutating with the sentient smart oil, and then it began to somehow embed itself into the steel and other materials, morphing into all types of very, very strange shapes, sometimes exhibiting what I can only say looks to be some type of life characteristics. Not the greatest spelling, but I believe that they lost all control of their lab project, putting the very existence of mankind in grave danger. Well, they don't care. They want to make mankind obsolete. So, when people make these comments like that about they lost control and like Israel lost, and that's why Barack went down. Nothing happens without a reason. There's always a plan. They hardly ever deviate from the plan. So. But yeah, you all remember the Corexit. The Corexit was the stuff that they put in there was probably worse than the actual BP spill. The latest news on BP, of course, is that they temporarily suspended them from any contracts. So a little slap on the hand. But that's the thing. Now they're pushing this whole climate change crap agenda again. Right after the man-made Frankenstorm. They call it Frankenstorm because it was weather modification induced storm. So they're going to use that. They use that for multiple reasons, but one of them was to push the CO2 tax after the election. This is what they're talking about, though. Researchers create the world's first fully synthetic, self-replicating living cell. Scientists call it the first self-replicating species we have on the planet, whose parent is a computer. So, also, a part of weather modification is the aerosols, is these nanoparticles. They're actually designed, I don't know if they're mass produced by the national laboratories, but the technology definitely comes from them. That's, again, funded by your tax dollars, and they spray these things, these little nanobots, and they get in your bloodstream, and they interact with your brain, your blood-brain barrier and your little brain neurons, and basically you're already in the matrix. You're already part of this neural network, as we were talking about in the last video, as these little nanobots from these aerosols and chemtrails are pumping through your bloodstream, self-replicating, and also able to use you as a power source. So this is what this video was talking about, Mr. Venter's synthetic DNA, this Craig Venter. So you can go in there and check it out. So next up, we have something similar. Antarctic Lake holds life under 50 feet of ice, long buried lake teeming with bacteria. So, it says researchers who drilled a salty lake buried under a 50-foot thick sheet of ice in Antarctica have found that its oxygen-depleted water is teeming with microbial life, despite having been completely sealed off for 2,800 years. I think there's actually an X-Files episode, now I'm thinking about it, about this stuff that lived basically in the under the sea or something like that, way down there, never been touched. All right, so we're talking about climate change, and this was a video of the Antarctic Sea Ice growth time-lapse from 2002 to 2007. I just threw in the background sounds. It's supposedly the sound of Earth from space. But this was actually created by NASA. This video was posted from November 12th, 2012. Antarctic sea ice sets another record. So I've been following this. This is actually from September 19th, 2012. But it says here that they set another ice record in September. And it goes on here, says, nobody tell the mainstream media or they might have to retract some stories and admit they are misrepresenting scientific data. So they talk about little chunks of ice, such as this one, 10 years ago, on the size of Rhode Island, disintegrated and melted in the waters of Antarctica. It says the NPR failed to mention anywhere in its article that the Antarctic sea ice has been growing since satellites first began measuring the ice 33 years ago. The sea ice has been above the 33-year average throughout 2012. So then it's interesting when you find this article, Mississippi River could become impassable in 2 weeks because, you know, out in Venice and in, I believe it's England, they have floods going on right now. Redistribution of water. And so something's definitely going on with the Earth besides weather modification. The Mississippi River could be too shallow for barges between St. Louis and Cairo in 2 weeks due to decreasing water levels. The country's busiest inland waterway is nearly too low already for barges loaded with coal, steel, and other commerce. It's expected to dry up considerably in the next couple of weeks due to summer drought and the U.S. Army Corps engineers move to hold back water from the Missouri River. So this was news during the summer and the drought and all that, but this is actually from November 28th, so it's getting worse. But remember this article I covered from the 21st of September this year, sea level continues decline. Want to comment? Al Gore. So it goes on here and it says that the latest sea level numbers are out, and it says that a 2-year-long decline is continuing. It says, no doubt Al Gore passed this on as good news to all his viewers, but he won't tell them that this decline is a continuation of the sea level decline that began in 2010. So where's the water going? It's being locked up on land as snow and ice. And you look at the record snowfall throughout the western U.S. this past winter, that's how an ice age begins. So if that sort of snowfall persists, sea levels will continue falling and won't begin rising again until the end of the next ice age. But they're going to hit you over the head with all sorts of propaganda, such as this from McClatchy. Climate talks must consider impact of thawing permafrost. Scientists who study the Arctic say they're worried that nations meeting this week to set targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions aren't adequately considering how much carbon dioxide and methane could be released from the world's rapidly thawing permafrost. And part of that technology that we were talking about, this oil stuff, is that it goes down here. This is from 2010. One of the reasons for these little nanobots, synthetic chromosomes, was environmental cleanup. So there's a good chance that this was actually used. Was to designed to trap carbon dioxide. So they're all about taking CO2 out of the environment. I've actually heard, now this is something that's purely speculative, about the goal of getting all of this carbon dioxide out of the air is to over-oxygenate the human race. In other words, the goal of lowering CO2 is to suffocate people. One of the symptoms would be asthma. If you think of it in terms of like how the Buddhists breathe, they have shallow breathing and they tend to live longer. But someone made the comment, I've heard Alan Watt talk about this, about possibly the smoking, tobacco and that. I don't know if it's nicotine or the tobacco smoke itself. Helps draw out these little nanobots that are pumping through your bloodstream, coming through the aerosol spraying. Not sure how much credibility there is to that, but it'd be worth considering, as a reason as to why the powers that be care so much about smoking, right? Kind of like obesity. Obama should make reducing greenhouse emissions a top priority in his second term. This, of course, is from McClatchy again, and it is a commentary. So, Superstorm Sandy capped a year off of bad weather in the U.S. Droughts in the Midwest dried up fields and reduced the food supplies. So, yep, definitely. It says an oddball winter that left typically snowy states in upper Midwest practically snowless, while other areas were repeatedly blanketed with the white stuff. So, and they say all of this is due to warming climate and climate change. So, moving on here, we have former UN official says climate report will shock nations into action. It goes on, it says the next UN climate report will scare the wits out of everyone and should provide the impetus needed for the world to finally sign an agreement to tackle global warming, a former head of the UN negotiations said. So, it says this is going to scare the wits out of everyone. So, that's just how they justify it, right? And it's justify the means. So, U.S. carbon tax gains attention as climate change resurfaces. The climate change is suddenly a hot topic again. I wonder why. The issue is resurfacing in talks about a once radical deal, a possible carbon tax, which they already kind of have in Australia. Ask them how that's going over there, right? UN seeking global carbon regime at climate summit in Doha and Qatar. So, thousands of delegates representing almost 200 governments and dictatorships are gathering in Qatar in a desperate bid to keep climate change alarmism alive long enough to create a UN-run planetary carbon regime. However, as the climate hysteria continues its march towards irrelevance, following the spectacular implosion of the UN global warming theories and multiple scandals in recent years, delegates at this year's conference of the parties, COP18, know they are in a race against time. Mostly because the Kyoto Protocol that was signed in 1997 expires at the end of the year. One of the goals of the conference is to finalize the creation of an international mechanism for mass wealth redistribution, essentially transferring vast amounts of money from taxpayers in more prosperous and liberty-minded countries to the generally dictatorial regimes ruling poorer nations. So remember what I said, that's what it's all about. Even the head of the IPCC, our panel members said that's the whole point, is to redistribute wealth. So they don't care about the planet or environment. Just look at BP, look at many other things such as chemtrails and stuff like that. Poisoning the water supply, poisoning the air, poisoning the food supply. And more propaganda says here, a call for new ethics in an overpopulated planet. Just a bunch of nonsense. She talks on and says how good the sun is, but it's burning us in the ozone layer and CFCs. And over the past 250 years, man's actions have continued to alter the Earth's atmosphere dramatically, without mentioning weather modification or chemtrails, of course. Say in 1960, the average person lived to 53 years old, but in 2010, the average human life was extended to 60 years. See, I heard that argument from family members over Thanksgiving, and I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I hear stories all the time of people before they even retire are dying. Well, that's the purpose, right? Before they can collect Social Security and all that, they want you to just die. Otherwise, just keep working for that pension. In fact, they're actually calling on people that are retired to actually work off and pay for their work to receive their pensions after they've already paid into it. So this is what they think of you. So as you hear more and more stories about 50-year-old of men dying of heart attacks and people with cancer all the time, and that, just say, hey, we're living longer, right? So this woman says, the paradox is people who have contributed to the least to global warming are the ones that are impacted the most. See, ethics. Yeah, it is. Is it ethical to act without knowing the consequences of these advances? Like all the stuff that they, like I said, that all these things that they spray in the air and put in the water, and now with genetically modified crops, they don't know what it's going to do. They're experimenting. So she makes the argument because of technology, modern technology that's used to enslave you and experiment on you, well, there's a call for a change in ethics. So yeah, she goes on and starts talking about overpopulation, just go ahead and blame yourselves. But yeah, they really do want to reduce the population. I'll continue when we come back, and I'll go through some of the quotes that the global elite, they'll make you want to lose your lunch.